PNR with Adam R. Welcome to 3PNR. I'm your host, Adam R. Joining me for this episode is Robert Spearing of MUFON. Robert, how you doing, sir?
I'm doing good, Adam. How are you?
Doing well. Glad to have your time. Glad to have you back. Much to talk about.
Nice to be back.
So what's MUFON? You guys have got to be under, I don't know, crazy amount of stress, the amount of reports going on, the disclosure, the lack of acknowledgement. Now these balloons flying over that people are speculating it's not just China, but there might be other bodies or objects that may or may not be a foreign power. What are your thoughts on this?
Well, we could spend a whole hour on this. MUFON has been taking a deep dive into it. A lot of our field investigators have been doing research on various angles. We've been going through 3 years of MUFON reports, especially those with daytime video that have white objects in them. And we're trying to match up these UFO sightings to possible sensitive military and, say, nuclear power area facilities that might be sensitive and might have been surveilled by the Chinese. We have well over 500 cases with videos that we're looking at right now. Another aspect of it is, while there is plenty of footage of the Chinese balloon shoot down off the coast of the Carolinas that started it all, there are some very interesting questions that need to be asked about the other three objects. The one that was allegedly shot down over Lake Huron in Upper Michigan, the Tic Tac shaped object that may have been shot down over the Yukon, and the object that was shot down over Alaska. And we need to ask ourselves some very interesting questions. I think the most important question about the other three objects is that the United States government has not released one bit of footage of the shoot downs. Okay, whenever a sophisticated fighter jet like an F-22 or an F-35 is being used in a combat mission, there is always camera footage being taken of the action by that aircraft. They have not shown the world one bit of footage. Another interesting question we could ask is, how could they not have found any of the wreckage from these three locations? Okay, the United States has satellites that can find a dime in the Sahara Desert. Okay, so if they did shoot these objects down, I'm sure they already have them in their possession. Another interesting thing is that the object over Lake Huron, the pilot could not identify what it was. However, it did affect his instrumentation, the instrumentation of a highly sophisticated 21st century aircraft. And he said that it was octagon shaped. Okay. He also needed 2 Sidewinder missiles to take it down. One of them malfunctioned for some reason, and they were looking for that in Lake Huron also. So if his instrumentation was affected, possibly the Sidewinder missile instrumentation was affected. They tried to say that just at the time the Lake Huron object was shot down, that a Pico weather balloon disappeared from radar. Pico weather balloons are very, very identifiable to a pilot of a fighter jet, and they're not octagon shaped. Okay. So the other interesting thing about Lake Huron, Lake Huron's the most interesting case to me, is that the initial press releases said it was unmanned. Now, you've not seen that again since the very first day that the Lake Huron object was allegedly shot down. You got to ask questions about that, all right? If the pilot couldn't identify it, it affected his instrumentation, And a Pico weather balloon would not do that, by the way. It was octagon shaped. They have never found it. How would they know that it was unmanned? Very interesting question.
That is a very good question because, well, Sidewinder missiles track their target via radar, and the instruments that are being affected on these sophisticated jets are also utilizing radar. And the other balloons, I could kind of understand if China put balloons on with semi sort of, radar jamming capabilities so they could infiltrate and perhaps do an observation. But octagon shape, that's in my mind, there's nothing aerodynamic about it unless it is, helium based and it's floating. And even so, if it's helium based and floating, how's it jamming equipment?
Well, I mean, if it had some sort of sophisticated, instrumentation on it, it quite possibly could. But let's take a deeper dive into the octagon-shaped object. I decided personally to go into the MUFON database and specifically do a search out of our 128,000 cases for the word octagon.
Robert, is there a chance you get a little closer to your mic, just a touch?
Yeah. I decided to do a deep dive into octagon shapes, and I did a search in our CMS for octagon-shaped objects, and what I found was startling. Okay, we have in the past 3 to 4 years at least 6 reports of octagon-shaped objects that have come down and hovered over cars. Each of these objects was approximately 60 feet in diameter. Oh. They were octagon shaped, and they had configurations of orange, red, and yellow lights on their bottoms. And the interesting thing is that these witnesses drew illustrations of what they saw, and they are remarkably similar. And the interesting thing is that the lighting patterns on the bottoms of these objects, while they all had the 3 colors that I mentioned before, the lighting patterns were different in every single case. So I believe that the lighting patterns are actually very, very important to decipher at some point as to what the object was doing. And it gets worse because one of the reports we got approximately 3 years ago, I don't have it in front of me, an object came down over a car in Louisville, Kentucky. What's interesting about that case is that, are you familiar with Fran Ridge's NICAP and their MADAR project?
I'm familiar with MADAR. I'm not entirely familiar with the project itself.
Okay, I belong to the MADAR team. I have a unit. It's pretty much the size of a coffee cup. You plug it into your computer modem, and it reads barometric pressure changes that are sudden, and it reads sudden changes in the electromagnetic field. The unit costs about $250. It's an all-volunteer program, and they're scattered across the United States. And if something essentially changes the magnetic field or the barometric pressure sharply, it suggests that something is coming in or out of the atmosphere.
Right. And the idea behind that is so investigators across the United States, or even the globe for that matter, would have data to kind of correspond with the data of other MADARs. Also, if you want to work it in concert with FAA radar to get an idea to triangulate a location of this thing, right?
And yes, and we do that with the MUFON reports. They have a fellow who compares MADAR alarms when they get set off to possible correlations to MUFON cases, and that's where I'm going with this. At 4:15 in the morning, this octagon object came down over a car. Within 30 seconds prior, the Louisville, Kentucky MADAR alarm went off, which suggests that whatever this octagon was, it had come from outer space.
Huh. And at 60 feet, it dwarfs an F-18 or any other military airplane.
It would. And I believe that's why the pilot of Lake Huron didn't know what he was looking at. And obviously, an octagon that big coming from space would have the capability to jam Sidewinder missiles and F-22s for sure.
So did they get a hit? Did one missile contact the object and it drop, or did it avoid it?
That's the thing. They have never said anything. So I keep using the word alleged shoot down.
Right.
All right. Because a lot of people say to me, it's not aliens, because if it was aliens, we wouldn't have been able to shoot it down. And I go to people, have you seen the wreckage? How do you know they shot it down? How do you know it wasn't aliens? All right. Because they make you believe they shot it down. So it must be Chinese or something. What if it's not?
Right.
All right. What if they didn't shoot it down and that's just a cover story? I mean, there's so much smoke and mirrors going on with this right now, and they're absolutely silent about it at this point. Like they want it to go away. All right. So it's either there's three possibilities. It's either something Chinese or Russian or Iranian. It's either something very anomalous, possibly aliens, possibly time travelers, whatever, or our military is so inept at this point, we're shooting down Hobby Lobby balloons, and they're just too ashamed to admit it.
Yeah, there's a couple of parts to that. So if I'm the Chinese government, and we know, so there's accounts like David Fravor's account, the Tic Tac. It's on record, a lot of witnesses, a lot of professional observers. We know that happened. The question of UFOs is not a question of if they exist, rather than who's at control. We know they exist. So if you're the Chinese government and you want to spy in America, what better smokescreen or scapegoat for that matter would be UFOs, right? Because they could put these small inflatable objects to come over here, and the psyche of most, Americans be, it's a UFO or it's alien in nature. But then again, there could be, and here's that thing again, where it could be one or two of them are actually extraterrestrial intelligence, and or some of them are Chinese, spy items or Russian, whatever it may be. Because when you listen to David Fravor and you hear the accounts and the claims he makes and how the Tic Tac behaved and maneuvered, and it went from where he was to his cap point instantly, there's no way we're shooting that down. That's not happening. And like you said, the octagon shaped one, it could be that this pilot fired a rocket, and maybe let's consider how these vehicles are traveling or how they're traversing space and time. I mean, they're, in my opinion, utilizing frequencies, right? And it's altering the matter around it. It could be that this missile detonated upon where it tracked the object to be in the airspace and blew up there, but it didn't actually contact the vehicle itself. Do we know if they collected? So the one they shot off the coast of the Carolinas, did we collect any material from that?
Yes, they got the whole thing.
Okay,
they got the whole thing.
And so I mean, with that being said, that was an obvious Chinese balloon. We know this, and we were able to obtain some of the material. Lake Huron, however, if it were downed, this isn't like the ocean. It is deep. That's a deep lake, but it doesn't provide the same powerful currents as the ocean would. I think we would have collected something.
Yeah, and don't you think that the missile would have pinged if it didn't explode? If they said that one of them didn't explode, so they've got to be able to find it by pinging it. All right. Now, here's what's interesting about that. Last week, a very, very interesting news story came out about Lake Huron, that they just found a 127-year-old shipwreck, because Lake Huron is part of what's called like the Great Lakes Triangle, similar to the Bermuda Triangle.
Right.
There's a lot of disappearances there. People have suggested there's a vortex there. So possibly that's where an octagon object will come into the atmosphere. But they found this ship, and it was such an innocuous article, but in my mind I said, hey, that tells me that was found by accident, and that there's probably a larger search going on under Lake Huron right now. Well, they're looking for either the wreckage, B, the Sidewinder that didn't detonate, or both.
Well, right. Yeah, I mean, you remember when we went looking for the Titanic, initially we weren't looking for the Titanic. We created that story to go look for Russian subs.
That's correct. The Global Explorer, right?
Right,
Wasn't that the name of the ship?
Yeah. So we utilize this narrative to say we're going to go look for the Titanic because it's historically important. But truth be told, they were there looking for Russian submarines. That's so what they're doing down there. And we found this wreck. Well, then the question should be asked, well, why were you looking for that wreck in the first place? Did anyone make a statement to that?
Exactly. No, it was just a historical. They found this historical artifact. That's the whole thing. Now, I want to keep going with the octagon because there's more.
Sure.
One of the octagons that came down over a person's car was in a town called Stony Point, I believe is the name of it. It was several miles west of Edmonton, Canada. It's also 1,000 miles south of where the Yukon object was shot down in Dawson, Yukon. Okay. In 2016, we got a really interesting case with video from a place called Haas Lake. And when I was actually mapping out the Stony Point location in Canada, and I believe it's Saskatchewan, right next to it, 15 miles away, was Haas Lake. Now, in Haas Lake, a guy was flying his drone, and he was taking video of the autumn foliage in this very remote forested area of Canada. And all of a sudden, his drone was about 500 feet. An object shot out of the trees below, from the forest below, and whizzed within 5 feet of his drone. The object was approximately 4 feet. It had no visible means of propulsion. And when the National Director of MUFON Canada did a frame-by-frame analysis of the video, the object was going at Mach 8, which is about 5,000 miles per hour.
Whoa.
So a 4-foot wide object, no visible means of propulsion, goes from 0 to 5,000 miles per hour, coming out of the trees 500 feet up past the drone. How is that possible? All right. So we designated that as a fast, a fast walker, basically.
Right, like a go fast.
Yeah, and we found other videos, on YouTube, a couple in the United States, one in South Carolina, of the exact same object. All right, and these things are whizzing around at low altitude all over the world. They're really fast, and it was in conjunction within 15 miles of where this 60-foot octagon was seen. All right, now this summer, there was a near collision over the Atlantic Ocean between a commercial airliner flying from Rhode Island to Philadelphia International Airport.
I've read about that.
It was off the coast of New Jersey, sort of near McGuire, Fort Dix, which is notorious for UFO and alien reports. And this thing almost collided with the plane. That got us looking at more ocean and pilot cases, because in August of this year, we had the Catalina Island incident where over the Pacific near California, we had the racetrack lights. You remember that story?
Yeah, I do remember that, actually. That faded away. It's kind of weird. That story came to the front and center. It just disappeared.
Mm-hmm. There's more reports from the Pacific Ocean. One in particular is 2 airplanes going, one from Australia to Vancouver, Canada again, and one going from Hawaii to Vancouver in the North Pacific, in an area of the Pacific where plane transponders don't work. It's a dead zone, so you can't see the plane actually, on the radar screen. So it's sort of a dead zone. These 2 planes were side by side in flight going to Vancouver. The pilots met up in Vancouver and both discussed what they saw, and one of them filmed what they saw. 65 miles ahead of them, they saw a very elongated cigar-shaped object with little satellite objects going around it. And we have video of this. Our guy in Hawaii is an astrophysicist. MUFON's state director in Hawaii is an astrophysicist. And he did a size analysis.
What's his name in Hawaii?
I can't think. I'd have to look it up.
I'll look it up. Okay.
His first name's Richard. But he came to the conclusion that the main object was 2 miles long. over the Pacific Ocean in a dead zone, and it had satellite objects either doing some sort of like coming and going, doing reconnaissance, or somehow protecting the object. And the conclusion to this whole story is that in 1958, there was a military base where a number of generals saw a very elongated shape in the sky over one of our military bases, and it had all sorts of satellite objects around it. So that would suggest that the same phenomenon has been going on for 75 years.
Richard Griffiths, that's his name.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
So a couple things, Robert, couple things I'm going to kind of add to that.
Mm-hmm.
The smaller objects that are moving at a high rate of speed. So
yes.
a lot of people want to, they want to scream nay at this because, like, oh, why is it so different? You got to understand a significantly higher intelligence is going to use a much better drone system for reconnaissance, right? They're not just going to come. Let's be frank. If you go to a new planet and there's oxygen, now maybe your planet has oxygen too, but it's a different level of gas. You can't breathe ours, right? So they're going to have smaller objects that can maneuver and find what they call plausible places of study. They're not just going to send a ship everywhere. It's not resourceful. Secondly, a lot of people are going to ask the question, like, why are these pilots observing? And it's known, and I've read many, many studies on this. If there's something abnormal in the sky and an airline commercial pilot's reporting it, it's been known that they would maneuver in such a way where they could make a better observation and report down the ground. It's part of their job to make an observation, to one, deem the airspace, whether it's safe or not, or to try to identify whatever it is that's up there so that if they need to, they communicate with the military. So when people say, well, why would this pilot be doing this? Well, it's part of his job. That's the fact. So it's bizarre that so many naysayers, they're hell bent on the different shapes of these vehicles and why are they not consistent? Well, here's the truth. We're like humans and like any other species. As technology evolves and advances, you're going to have different models, and each model is going to serve a different purpose, right? I said this many times. There are here on Earth, we have buses and we have supercars. Supercars are fun. They're meant to race. That's their profile. They look that way. A bus is meant to transport a large amount of people. It's a large thing. It's bulky. That's its profile. So for the different vehicles being seen in our space, each one of them have their own purpose. They're designed for a specific purpose. I firmly believe that the Tic Tac that Fravor came across. So it's reported these things are going from 80,000 feet to 1 foot above the ocean. Below the surface is a disturbance, probably an underwater vehicle. It could very well be this Tic Tac takes things from 80,000 feet or whatever their connection is up there down to the surface to now put occupants, whether it be physical or just the energy thereof, into what's below the surface to transport to another location. People are not understanding that. They're treating this as science fiction. There are going to be different vehicles for different purposes. Is that about right?
I think you're absolutely right. There's a number of ways you could take that. Just like we have so many different car companies. Let's say it's not aliens. Let's say it's humans from the future. All right. They may have their Chevys and they may have their Fords, right? Or it could have something to do with the purpose of the vehicle itself, like you're suggesting. And to get to that point, I always go back to the Nuremberg 1561 woodcut by Hans Glaser, which shows that battle in the sky of the orbs and stuff.
Right.
In the lower part of it, there's a big black spear. Okay. And it certainly looks like a B-1 bomber, all right, if you were looking at it with 21st century eyes. And when people say, oh, yes, that's, it's an alien battle going on, I'm saying it's hard for me to believe that the spear-shaped object is alien, because why would aliens bring a spear-shaped object across, the galaxy, all the way to Earth? It's more likely it was manufactured on Earth to fly in a specific atmosphere equal to Earth's. So was the alien battle being observed by an Earth vehicle? And if so, what was a 21st or 22nd century Earth vehicle doing in 1561? So it just makes the entire rabbit hole deeper and deeper and deeper.
Yeah, you're right. Because there's no reason for aerodynamics in space. We know that. It doesn't matter what shape you put in space. It's going to travel based on something pushing it in a certain direction, gaining or reducing speed. As we use our probes, we use planets to gain speed by using their gravitational pull.
Right.
So what they're witnessing in that era, it's hard to say, because from what I understand and all I've read, the observers we have here have been around for thousands of years. And so, because if I'm being honest, if humans were going to go, if we found another planet and they're breathing a mixture of gas that is, we really can't breathe it,
right.
We're going to make an observation. It's a science study at said point, right? And we're going to watch them for as long as we please to watch the evolution and et cetera, et cetera. And so, and if we were going to introduce the idea of a hybrid program, let's say, hypothetically speaking, they're humanoid in some sense where their biology and our biology is not too far off, but it's not exact. A hybrid program takes forever. It's not going to happen in a lifetime. Now, even with the most sophisticated technology, that you're talking millennia, long period of time for a real, true hybrid program to be successful. So a lot of people, I hear this a lot too, mostly from our government, like they're calling it a national security threat. Well, if they've been around this long, they haven't attacked. I don't think they're gonna. I don't think they have any motivation to do so. We're just part of a channel they're watching, like the National Geographics at the end of the day. And I've said this a lot on the podcast. They're not allowed to intervene other than study, but unless they hit us with our car. They're like, if we're in Africa, we're studying lions, and we watch one get mauled by another group of lions, we can't get involved. That's nature. But if we hit it with the car, we're obligated. It's our problem. We got to deal with it. And then that being said, the other big thing I keep hearing from everybody, and it's their version of naysay. Well, why didn't they even introduce themselves to the government? Why would they? Why would that be if we're a super sophisticated group of individuals from another star system and or dimension? I'm approaching the Elons of the world. That's who I'm greeting. That's who I'm meeting. Not the government. They compartmentalize. They have their own agenda. But people like Elon. This guy, like when he goes to Mars, right? An example, when he goes to Mars, the application's not going to have the box of race. It's not going to have the box of religion. It's definitely not going to have the box of your political agenda. Because when you go to Mars, you're going there for the purpose of terraforming. You're going there as a species. You're going to behave like scientists. The rest of those things don't matter anymore, right? So,
yes,
go ahead.
Oh, I was going to say, yeah, with terraforming, it's weird that you mentioned that, because the other day my 11-year-old was watching one of those scientific cartoons. I can't even pronounce the name, Kurgle Blitz or something.
Oh, yeah.
Right? And they were talking about how long it would actually take to terraform a world like Venus, which would actually be easier than a world like Mars. And they went through all of the different steps necessary. And while we would never see it terraformed in our lifetime, over 1,000 years, they could actually terraform Mars or Venus. All right. I just thought that was interesting.
Yeah. Well, but Venus, because it's humans, take note. It's our future if we don't change some stuff, right? Because their carbon footprint's enormous. To terraform Venus, you'd have to start reducing the carbon output there. You'd have to introduce something. I'm not sure how they would do it, but they'd have to reduce the carbon factor. And not to mention the pressure of the atmosphere is so great, it would crush us. Where Mars has little to no atmosphere, and to terraform that would take much longer, because now you got to create an atmosphere, and you have to create a hospitable environment. So, yeah, So for an extraterrestrial intelligence coming to Earth, where there's this really perfect mixture of gases and weather, and our moon. Let's not forget our moon, how important that is. Its exact distance and the exact size maintains the balance of this planet. It's pretty incredible. So that being said, we would have to be we're under observation. We're a study. And if they are inhabiting Earth, it's more likely that they're like underwater, like how some people suggest, because they don't want to be in plain sight. It's not possible. We're a crazy species. We barely get along, if at all. So, well, I don't know. Like, what do you think, Robert, overall, in your opinion, about the vehicles in our airspace? What is your opinion on them?
I think a lot of them are probably robotic, like it's been suggested. I mean, even Carl Sagan used to say if somebody was coming from another world, it's most likely they would be sending robotics first to check it out. That I can understand because that would explain why a lot of the things that people see are small. When people see these alleged balls of plasma flying along airplanes, maybe they are small spherical craft enveloped in plasma to hide them from a radar. Okay.
Right.
So, yeah, I think initially they're robotics. But if you go back throughout history, especially in the 1940s and 50s, when there were a lot of contactees and abductions in the 70s and 80s, where people would actually see the spaceships and stuff. You don't see that stuff anymore.
No.
And I thought about that. I said, why has the phenomenon changed? And I came to the conclusion that the phenomenon probably hasn't changed. It's just that whoever our visitors are, whether they're Silurians from under the ocean and we're slowly encroaching on their civilization and they're getting worried, whether it's time travelers, whether it's aliens, they all know we have highly sophisticated cell phone cameras now, and they have to change their method of operation because otherwise we'd be snapping pictures of them all the time. Well, so I think they had to go undercover more.
I have a theory to that, Robert. Let's pause there for 1 second.
Okay.
We were talking about, how the ability for people to visualize and see these objects have reduced. And I had a theory on that as well, as I was saying before, because of the advent of all our smart technology, our phones, computers, and even glasses in some cases. I mean, in the room I'm in right now, there's multiple cameras, there's microphones everywhere. I travel around with a computer in my pocket. I think their ability to make an observation of us has become easier. We've made it easier. It's why you see probably less invasive abductions, right? I mean, there's the initial one. Obviously, in my opinion, they're doing a physical wellness check. But as far as observing you and studying you, we made it all too easy, right? And
that's a really good point. Yeah, keep going. That's a really good point.
Yeah, and so not only that, there is that other flip side where each one of these cameras are starting to take better quality pictures. And I don't think with their technology that's much of a threat to them, so much as it could be part of their social experiment as well. I mean, I have to believe with such sophisticated technology, if they didn't really truly want us to make an observation, that we wouldn't be able to. But like anything else, like for us as humans, if we're going to introduce ourselves to a new tribe in South of America that, they've never seen the outside world, that's not something we could do instantly. We can't just, hey, we're here and this is technology. They're not going to accept it. They're going to have pushback. Their biology is going to speak against it. We'd have to do a gradual introduction with small, because you put a smartphone in front of an indigenous person who's never seen technology, in his mind, you're a witch and you should be killed. You know what I mean?
Absolutely correct. Yes. Another interesting thing is those cargo cults in the South Pacific. When they first saw United States Air Force land and create landing strips, when we were preparing to invade Japan, and they had never seen airplanes before, and they end up worshiping and building straw airplanes as temples to the gods that came from the sky to visit them, because they have no conception. They have no conception that, we're just a couple of generations ahead of them. But to them, our servicemen with their flying machines were gods.
Right. Now, rewind time to ancient man and some of the depictions of the quote unquote gods coming down. And they're doing exactly that. They're idolizing them. Well, we got to make some images of them. Let's make some stone statues and speak about these gods that are coming down in what they say fiery, but just could be, again, if you look at what a UFO is, it's more than likely manipulating the space around it with frequencies, however it's doing it. And that's these brilliant lights you're seeing. So for primitive man, that's fire in the sky and it's moving. And then when they land, these are clearly gods. There's no way we could do this. So it's interesting you bring that point, because now we're talking relevantly modern. This is World War II you speak of. And they're seeing prop planes, large ones landing, and they're like, oh my, these are definitely gods. No question. How are we doing this? So it's in full circle. As we evolve, so are the observers that are observing us. They have to evolve too. Just like, any other biology or intelligent in biology, whether it be the form of energy or physical biology, it has to evolve. especially if it's making an observation of something in particular, like us.
Yes, and I am a person who believes that we've been being visited for thousands and thousands of years. And, if you look deep enough at some of the myths and some of the drawings, there are hints that these people were seeing some sort of highly advanced technology. And yeah, if these visitors had been captured, as in some cases in medieval Europe, it took the intervention of the parish priest to stop the townspeople from executing the so-called witch. All right, very famous case in I believe it was Sweden, where the ship got caught on the anchor. That the anchor got caught on the steeple of a church, and the sailor, I guess, who went down to try to unhook it, was captured by the people, and it took the parish priest's intervention to stop them from executing the spaceman, the so-called spaceman.
That's a very interesting story. I don't think I've heard that one before. I have to look into that.
Yeah, I believe it's in Wonders of the Sky by Jacques Vallée and Chris Aubeck.
Huh. I'll have to look into that. So, in a nutshell, at the end of the day, and this is the big one for a lot of, I know so many of these people. Here's what I'm learning. The people that give me the most pushback on the idea of UFOs even existing have a very strong religious structure, all right? The other group are very science-minded, and because they can't examine it in an elaborate laboratory, they're giving pushback. And I get that. I respect that. But when it's like a blatant disrespect to our servicemen who are witnessing this up close. Because if you listen to David Fravor, word for word, every interview, nothing changes. He stays exact, because understand, he's a trained observer. So his job is to recall exacts to what it is he's witnessed. And by what he described, the way it was interacting with him when he was trying to fly around to make an observation, and the way it disappeared instantly, and then you see it break radar, and in that image, the video you see later on with another group of jets up. I mean, you can't dispute that. And then I hear these I don't want to say they're naysayers. They're making an observation, and they're trying to rationalize what it is we're seeing, right? And I grant that they're skeptical by nature, and some of the skeptics, that's their business, is to break down these things and kind of explain it away in a rational way. You can't explain that irrationally. Not what our technology is current. It's not possible. So I think what happens is people start hearing the naysay from these quote unquote specialists that they're skeptics, versus the community who witnessed these objects, and they're kind of, well, who seems more professional? Because these other people are seeing them. How are they? These are regular people, and they live in whatever environment. So they're casting doubt on these other people. But then you're putting, like, Commander Fravor and other people of his stature in the same group, and that's unfair. It's unfair. And
I'll tell you straight up. It's like I'm a practicing Christian, okay?
Right.
And I'm also scientifically minded, and I believe that the two are not necessarily mutually exclusive. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
I do think. I mean, if you talk to my pastor, he'd tell you no aliens don't exist, and I don't even try to get into the conversation with him, because I think that a lot of stuff that went on in the Bible may be, supernatural. And I believe that there are instances which have been documented by many authors over the decades, that maybe there's some stuff in the Bible that actually suggests, some sort of, superior technology from another planet or another time. Okay. So I don't think they're mutually exclusive. I think that it can work together. If I found out tomorrow that there are aliens, all right? The governments of the world apparently worry it will destroy our religious beliefs and stuff. It wouldn't change mine in the least. And I think people are much more savvy today than they were a couple of hundred years ago, even a couple of decades ago. I think religion would survive just fine. Okay?
Well, religion would. It's the figurehead who likes being in other words, if Joel Osteen had a be confronted with aliens, you're taking some of his power away from his teachings, right? He's like, well, now, you know, my congregation, my constituents are going to look at me like, well, what have you been telling us all this time? You know? Right. And so it's the people that have to let go of that power. You know what I mean? Because religion should survive. Ultimately, at the end of the day, what people call God is a very, in my opinion, this is my opinion, a very elevated intelligence, right? An architect of many, and I'm not saying created the universe, but more manipulated to make it more inhabitable for, you know, I think there's many, many different Earth-like planets. And even if these other planets that are on the other side of, just say, our galaxy are 20,000 years more advanced than us, it takes 100,000 years for a radio wave to cross just the Milky Way, let alone the vastness of the universe. So it's almost unlikely that we're going to hear from another intelligent being from elsewhere, unless you consider our observers who have taken that next step. They are now utilizing a different kind of physics and technology to bridge the gap. And they're intelligent enough to recognize that we are not there yet. We don't behave like a species on Earth. We are divided as divided comes. We find reasons to hate one another. We find reasons to be in different camps. And God knows we find many reasons to go to war. So an elevated intelligence that's literally overcome the idea of there being an individual and we should behave like a species for the greater good, they're not going to want to talk to us directly. They will, however, want to study us.
Yeah, I definitely do not. I think that any superior technological civilization from another planet or another time looks at us and goes, "Oh my goodness, what are these idiots doing down there on that planet?" Because we can't get our act together. That's for sure. But you mentioned an interesting point before about coming from another world. We are getting close to a technological point where we can figure out how to bend space and time. There's the physicist Eric Davis. You might know that name. He already writes white papers on how to bend space and time so that you don't need 100,000 years to get from Alpha Centauri to here. You could do it in like 3 seconds, basically. And there's other people who have the idea of creating some sort of warp field around an object so that it's traveling in an area between space and time. I don't think it's impossible to go from the furthest point away from us in the universe to here in a second. I really think that it's technologically feasible, and I think within 200 years we'll have the ability to go anywhere in the universe.
Sure. I mean, because as it sits right now, an atom on the other side of the universe and an atom here will react simultaneously, instantly to one another, right? So that there's some physics that speaks that can happen. It really comes to, are we responsible enough to make that travel? I mean, would we trust humanity to travel to if let's say we found another planet? And I always think of this movie Avatar when I hear this, right? When I think of this, we find another planet, its oxygen is near ours, right? It's almost feasible for us to find some way to breathe it, or we'd have to put masks on. But we find a race of intelligent beings down there, and they're not quite sophisticated yet. They might even be in their stone or their Bronze Age, you know, like the Roman time maybe. Are we responsible enough to go there and not impose our own ways upon them? That's the question.
I certainly wouldn't want to be on the planet being visited by us, all right? Because I don't know what we would do to them. If you go back through human history and look at what happened to the Native Americans, where we were giving them blankets with smallpox, and I mean, you know, all through human history, when one civilization comes in contact with an inferior civilization, they destroy it. And
sure.
I don't think we're advanced enough yet to go to another planet, meet the inhabitants there, and not destroy their civilization or try to take their booty. You know what I mean?
Right, because initially scientists will go, and it's going to be a good study. And scientists, I would imagine, are smart enough not to just go make that introduction. It'll freak them out. We don't know what their religious beliefs are or their beliefs at all. They might look at us as, I don't know, demons. But initially, scientists will go. It won't be until science discovers some sort of, I don't know, something there that we find precious. And then corporations are going to move in because they're going to, well, we could mine that. Here on Earth, that sells for a lot of money. Like, imagine we found a planet that had, I don't know, a bunch of gold and platinum.
Right.
There's nothing stopping corporations from going. We can't prevent that.
I absolutely agree. Yeah.
So until we get to the point here on Earth when we realize these things we call precious are not very precious, like in other words, in a post-apocalyptic world, you cannot eat money and gold. It serves no value. The wealthy people of that era will be who has ammunition and food and water. That's going to be the wealth, you know?
And seeds.
Right. Yeah. Because conventional currency will be rendered useless in that scenario.
Right.
And that's when humanity will either collapse or we're going to come together and say, look, we need to rebuild the right way. So as far as, finding another planet with life on it, because as it sits right now, and I'm fascinated by space exploration. I watch a lot of documentaries, and I know that we find exoplanets, and we're basically measuring light pulses, and we're measuring the gas we assume that's in the planet, but we can't actually see it. We don't know it's there. We know it could be a rock. We speculate it's a rocky planet that would potentially has water on it. We don't know, but when we find out, and God forbid there's primitive life there that's humanoid or otherwise. Initially, science goes. We learn it's when corporation gets involved. That's when we have a problem,
right? Then we end up poisoning that world,
right?
Like when a train car full of vinyl chloride, the rails, it blows up in Pennsylvania, in Ohio, and we just poison the planet that we go to,
right? And so here, our observers that are watching us here on this planet, I don't think they're motivated by resource, because I don't think they would wait for us to have the power of the sun in the tip of a rocket to start exploiting it. And even so, there's these, it's alleged that they go to rockets and they shut them down, and they're shutting down nuclear stuff, and people are like, oh, I think they love us. Their motivation's not love. It's the project. We can't allow this project to shut down. We're still learning, right? Because every time, Robert, every time I hear about people, they're abducted and we're being observed, I always imagine on an alien ship somewhere, there's this narrator, and he's talking about, now we're watching the humans, like in National Geographic.
Right.
I always imagine that. They're narrating what they're watching with us.
Right. Yeah, that's interesting. You made me think of that movie with Jim Carrey where he was living in a bubble, basically.
The Truman Show.
The Truman Show. Yeah, it's a very interesting movie. That could definitely be true.
I mean, I have to look at it that way, because if their motivation was resources or somewhere to live, they would have made their move by now. They would not wait this long, especially not when we're building more. Who even knows what weapons the United States has in black projects? Because when China tested that hypersonic missile, we barely batted an eye at that. And then fast forward, what was it like 2 weeks or 2 months ago, where the Navy was effectively testing lasers, plopping or shooting jets out of the sky. So a hypersonic missile, people understand, it's hypersonic, it's fast, but it's not the speed of light, and a laser travels the speed of light.
That's exactly, you're exactly right. It's like the only thing that can stop a hypersonic missile is a laser. Okay,
right.
So you make your point. Yeah, the thing that I find interesting though now, if it is just the project, for decades, people who believed in UFOs, people who were abducted, people who were MUFON members, we've been treated as tinfoil hat people. But suddenly, the United States government has an incredible interest in what's going on, and I'm saying, is there a paradigm shift going on, or is it even just all about money? All right, because it seems that after ATIP they got $22 million. There's more and more and more money flowing from the government towards these new corporations that want to investigate UFOs. To me, something is changing, and I can't put my finger on it.
I have an idea. So here's the difference between ufology back 20 years ago versus ufology now. 20 years ago, there weren't private industry billionaires going to space. Mm-hmm. Now there are, and it's undoubtedly they're gonna see something. They're gonna document it. Like I say this a lot. If Jeff Bezos sends a rocket to space with celebrities, they see a UFO, you better believe he's sending 5 more rockets with camera crews, because that's his new reality show. And Elon, if he sends rockets up and he happens to come across alien intelligence or technology, his motivation is, how do I connect with these guys? Because I want that technology. I want it to be shared. So I think what's happening is the government, they're on a timer now because more and more private industry is going up there, and billionaires are competitive. They're unbelievably competitive. There's even another, I think it's Virgin, I'm not sure which one, said they're going to create a cruise that goes around the moon and back.
That's Richard Branson, right? Virgin Galactic.
Yeah. So, I mean, at the end of the day, the government's like, oh, wow, we really got to step up here. They're going to. So it's not so, and I say this a lot. If the government ever listens to me, ever, I don't want disclosure. I want acknowledgement. I mean, I want top level. Yeah, I understand you can't be transparent. You can't tell us what's going on. I respect that. Whatever's happening in Area 51, we shouldn't know. We need to develop programs to keep us safe from our adversaries, because at the end of the day, everything we develop, they have to figure out a way to counter that. So I get all that. All I'm asking is acknowledgement, a greater form of acknowledgement. There's more value in that, because then what happens when the government's fully acknowledging what's going on, it's going to put the rest of the world in check and allow them to embrace the idea that there is something here. It's not us. And so religious figureheads are going to have their congregation sit down and be like, all right, listen, they acknowledge it. It's real. Now let's sit down and figure out the power of God. What did he create? What is it? The mysteries we were not eligible to know. And, again, Robert, we shouldn't know. We barely like each other. There's no shot we're going to be open and inviting to another race. It's just not, right now, it's just not possible.
Yeah, and there's a part of me that believes that they at least partially know what's going on. I forget if it was Chris Mellon or Lou Elizondo who said that if we knew, it would be very sobering, and then we would just have to keep going about our business. And I was like, wow, what a weird, cryptic, comment that was.
Well, who it is? It's the younger generations that, you could tell a kid tomorrow, a volcano just blew up in the middle of the ocean, wiped out a whole island of people. And the kid's like, oh my God, it's crazy. I got to get back in my game.
Yeah.
It's unfortunate. That's the truth, because we're today's society, we're entertained by 30-second long intervals of entertainment. Our attention spans are under attack as we speak. And I'm not accusing China of kind of putting this together, but it just happens to be that TikTok, that's their format, 30 seconds of entertainment, period. And it's everywhere. It's everywhere. And I know people even in my age groups that are affected by this. And I noticed that people, even in my age group, they can't sit through a whole documentary. I could. I like absorbing information. I really do. So I do my best to not entertain myself with, small incremental videos, because I know the damage it'll do ultimately. But that being said, if the government is going to introduce the idea of there being a extraterrestrial intelligence, it's going to be in the form of 30-second videos and small intervals over the course of time, because it's going to pre-program humanity. That's one way I could see happening, because I don't predict them landing on the White House lawn. I
don't know either. Yeah.
So moving forward, what are your programs or projects moving forward?
Well, tonight I'm finishing up an article for Outer Limits magazine on screens and the various ways they've been portrayed in UFO reports, from everything from contactees seeing screens on objects in the control room, for example, to people who are abducted and a thing goes over their bodies and they see their insides like an X-ray on a big screen, to other people being forced to sit down and look at a huge screen where they see the absolute total destruction of Earth for some reason, which I believe is some sort of psychic experiment. But screens are a very, very fascinating facet of ufology, and I've been diving into it heavy. MUFON itself has a lot of things going on. I was heavily involved with creating the Observer Network for our MUFON members, the recently released MUFON UFO map app. I was just on an episode of Ancient Aliens on February 10th that featured MUFON. This is a good year for MUFON. We have a lot of stuff coming out. Tomorrow, our media director, Ron James, is releasing his movie An Accidental Truth, which I've seen, and the end of it is quite stunning. So MUFON is doing a lot of projects, and I'm just grateful to be involved with a lot of them.
I think MUFON is going to be under a lot of pressure soon. I'll tell you why. As we start coming, as society starts coming to the exception that there are things in our space that cannot be explained. The intelligence is not here. And, you know, the majority of society, and I mean regular people that they don't bat an eye at ufology. They just don't care. They're going to be the very same people that are going to start looking towards MUFON. Like, all right, now we need answers because we're certainly not getting it from the officials. And it's going to put I think MUFON's going to be under immense pressure because people, you know how people are. They want answers. They want it now. They don't want to wait. I think that you guys are going to be put in a position where you're going to have more public speaking to larger groups of people over the course of the next 5 years. I think you should prepare for that.
Well, yeah, we have to, because also the private competition is getting stiff. Okay, there's groups and entities that have a lot bigger budget than we have. We have, you know, brand recognition, obviously, because we've been around for, you know, 50 years.
Right.
But yeah, we're being inundated now, and especially with a lot of experiencer reports, which I find interesting, and a lot of historical reports from the 70s that people all of a sudden are just reporting these historical cases. But we are overwhelmed with work is all I can say.
Yeah, I would say. I mean, like, you know, someone asked me once, well, why the government is looking into it. They're not going to be transparent about their findings. What I think should happen if the government was smart, they would create grants and help finance MUFON. Allow there to be a platform where questions could be diverted to MUFON representatives. And so the problem that there is that the government has this thing where they compartmentalize with themselves, let alone other entities, right? They barely give each other information. And I'm not sure why those measures are taken. I'm sure there's some strategical reason why. But at the end of the day, if MUFON were eligible for grants and some capital from the government, it would help you guys tremendously. It really would.
But our charter, we can't take money from the government. If we could get donations from private industry or from individuals, you know, like Elon Musk, for example, that we're allowed to do. But we can't take money from the government. I'm
going to call Jeff Bezos. I mean, if anything, if he's smart, look, you're wealthy beyond recognition. Mm-hmm. Why can't he should finance MUFON? And then if he really wants to turn his dollar back over, make a show out of it. People will watch, and he'll make. God knows Prime will have it front and center. He'll make his billions back. No question about it.
Yep. It's ufology is a very, very competitive field. And that's a good thing because it keeps people moving forward at a fast speed. You know, we don't sit on our laurels. You know, you got to keep going. And, you know, the technology is getting crazier. The challenges are getting more intense. And you just got to be on the top of your game in the UFO neighborhood.
Yeah, you guys, and here's the other thing, too, and I'm noticing it more. I'm seeing a lot of nonsensical documentaries and miniseries coming out where I could 1,000% tell that the stories are fiction, but they're presenting it as reality. And what's happening is it's damaging people like you and other investigators because now you're getting locked into a circle with them. And I like content creators, I want to say this, like, your stuff doesn't have to be super exciting. And if it does, you're not targeting the right audience. And if that's the case, if you are targeting the right audience, just say in the beginning, this is an interpretation, it's a fiction, whatever it is. Because when you present something as factual and it's not, you might get the attention of certain individuals, but when they do their due diligence and find out it's not, you now damage the real investigators out there. You're doing an injustice.
You are exactly correct. And as a matter of fact, I had a conversation with somebody yesterday who had been on a certain TV show. And when they saw the final product, they were appalled and said, this is fake. This isn't even what we were talking about. They just created this out of whole cloth. It's like that's what damages ufology.
Agreed. And it's sad because it's not just a fascinating topic, but it's also a history-making one. It's going to be anyhow. I don't think we're going to – I think within the next decade, the questions that we have about UFOs and life elsewhere, the answers are going to start – I don't even think from the government. I think we're going to be forced. I don't think we're going to have a choice anymore. I think at some point somehow, especially if this other guy figures out a way to manipulate space-time and bend space, forget it. Now we're forced, because if another entity somewhere else sees that, and then they're equivalent to us one way or other, we establish any form of communication. Everything we know historically right now, every science book, right out the window. It's all got to change. And we have to come to terms with that. And we should be an evolving species that's accepting of that.
Hey, 500 years ago, we believed that the sun revolved around the earth.
Right.
All right. And 120 years ago, we thought that our Milky Way galaxy was the entire universe. So it's like we've come so far so fast.
Yeah, and right now we're under the impression the universe is just the universe, and there's speculation that we're just one bubble of many universes. I mean, in a greater space of whatever. I mean, Matt, like I tell people this all the time, the ancient Greeks were remarkable inventors. Same with the ancient Egyptians, remarkable inventors. There was a clock that the ancient Greeks were making from water. They were using like a hydro clock, and it was pretty accurate, for the most part. And these other and why did it stop? Rome marched in there with Catholicism, and it was considered to be against, their belief system, and it was shut down. So imagine, we're 2,000 years behind on technology. Imagine what we'd be doing right now. I mean, just look at all our technology right now and add 2,000 years to it. Forget it.
Exactly. I've heard many times that had the Library of Alexandria not been burned down, we'd be on the moon for 600 years already. Easily.
We'd have bases and colonies and resorts. Mm-hmm. We'd probably already be on Mars. If I have to be honest, had we had the 2,000 year, added to our technology, Mars would not be somewhere so much habitable, so much as it would be. I think we're eventually going to find it as a resource, right, for material. And that's what the colonies there would be there to drill and so on. So the sky's the limit. And as far as ufology, Robert, I commend you for staying true to it, looking into it, and doing what you have to do, because answers need to be had. And our government's not going to be transparent anytime soon. Again, I do ask them, please acknowledge, that's all. But it's going to come down to you guys. You're the ones that are going to be responsible for bringing that information to the surface. And I commend you for dealing with the pressure that's coming, because it's coming, I promise. In any regard, before we close out, Robert, is there anything you want to add?
Just, I always like to push MUFON. We're a transparent organization. Our databases are available to anybody. And when I became a field investigator, it was probably the most intriguing thing I ever undertook. And I highly encourage people who have a deep interest in investigating the UFO phenomenon to consider becoming field investigators, because it is not only enjoyable, but it will open your eyes to what might be going on, and probably the most important question of our lifetimes. Agreed.
And the skeptics, I invite you to do the same. Join up. I mean, it's irresponsible to sit on your couch and cast doubt and throw nay at something without responsibly going out there to investigate to prove otherwise. It's not healthy. You got to go out there and do the same science. So that's what I mean. I see too many people sit around saying, that's nonsense. There's no way. That's safe to say from your home. Go out and do the research and then prove to me otherwise. You have to, these same people are like, well, you need to prove me the UFOs are real. Well, then prove to me they're not. Do the same work. It's the only fair thing to do. And don't do it in 2 days. Do a 6-month investigation. Put the time out there. Put the effort out there. You might come back. And I know people, Robert, I've spoken to people who've done this, and they came back changed. Mm-hmm. They can't exactly say for certain what it was supernatural or a higher intelligence, but it did give them pause, and that's enough, Mm-hmm. In any regard.
Yeah. 90% of the cases we get, we can solve. It's something mundane. It's the 10% that keep me going.
Right. Well, Robert, I appreciate having you back on. For those of you that are listening, we're going to say good day, good evening, good night. I'm going to talk to Robert in post.